Welcome to the EdUFaith Essentials podcast. EdUFaith Essentials is an educational podcast that provides essential information, resources, and tips about education, leadership, and topics about diverse learners. Diverse learners include students with disabilities who receive services under Section 504 or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, response to intervention and the multi-tiered system of support, English speakers of other languages, and related diverse learner categories. EdUFaith Essentials' mission is to bring positive awareness and promote equity and inclusion in education by sharing information and topics about non-traditional learners. EdUFaith Essentials' goal is to restore faith in education one student at a time by empowering listeners with knowledge, because we all know that knowledge is power, so let's be powerful. I am your host, Dr. Nakia, sending you good vibes and thanking you for joining me for another episode of the EdUFaith Essentials podcast. Let's remember the why with EdUFaith. EDU means education and faith means trusting or believing in one's ability. Please remember to reach out to us or subscribe to the EdUFaith Essentials and the EdUFaith Consulting website at www.edufaithconsulting.com. Let's dive into today's episode. Transforming Lives, celebrating 50 years of empowerment at Turn Community Services. And this comes out of Salt Lake City, Utah. In a world where inclusivity and belonging are paramount, Turn Community Services has been a beacon of hope and transformation for adult students with physical and developmental disabilities. Celebrating its 50th anniversary, the organization has conveyed from its humble beginnings to becoming a thriving community that nurtures personal growth and promotes active participation in society. Back in the 1970s, the vision for Turn Community Services was dreamt up by a courageous group of parents who recognized their children's untapped potential. According to Alyssa DeHart, Director of Development and Communications, pioneers understood that their children had much to contribute to society, even when the idea of inclusion was not the norm. They knew that the idea wasn't quite the norm back then. Their perseverance paved the way for a supportive environment where all individuals could thrive. What started as a basic lodging facility has blossomed into a comprehensive support system offering a wide range of services to enrich its members' lives. Brenda Harris, the Human Resources Coordinator, passionately described the mission of Turn Community Services. We are allowing them to thrive, to live life the way that we all live life, through an engaging community, through activities, through relishing in opportunities that many may take for granted, such as participating in art classes, holiday celebrations, community dances, and even beauty pageants. The Turn Community Service Team's impact work goes beyond mere employment. It's a calling, Harris expressed, emphasizes the profound connection that develops between staff and the students. You fall in love with the service and the individuals. They become a part of your life in a way that you never anticipated. And kudos to Turn Community Services and those pioneers who started a small organization with a vision and has now blossomed into 50 years of service. Those inspired by Turn Community Services mission and wish to donate can visit the website to find opportunities to volunteer or donate. In a world that often measures success through narrow benchmarks, Turn Community Services set an unparalleled example of inclusivity and empowerment, ensuring that every individual has the chance to shine brightly in the tapestry of community life. Kudos to Turn Community Services. That is our EdUFaith inspirational story. And if you have a story that you would like to share, please feel free to email me at edufaithforall@gmail.com. And thank you to the Salt Lake City, Utah community for all that you do in supporting and promoting inclusion. And that is it for our EdUFaith inspirational story. And of course, I'll have that link and the information on the EdUFaith Essentials YouTube page. Now let's shift to the month of February. Let's discuss the inclusive dates that we have to look forward to. First off, February is Black History Month, a time when we celebrate the contributions of African Americans and what the foundational pioneers of African Americans in our country have done to help support America. So kudos to Black History Month and all those who we recognize and celebrate who are of African American heritage. February is also Career and Technical Education Month, Financial Aid Awareness Month, Dental Health Month. Make sure you keep those teeth clean. Jewish Disability Awareness and Inclusion Months. Want to make sure that we're recognizing those in the Jewish communities with disabilities. February 2nd is Rheumatoid Arthritis Awareness Day. February 2nd is also Groundhog Day. February 3rd is National School Counseling Week, and that begins February 3rd through the 7th. February 4th is World Cancer Day. February 14th, Let's Share the Love, is Valentine's Day. February 14th is also Congenital Heart Defective Awareness Day. And February 14th is National Donor Day. So share the love, share the hearts, and donate. February 15th, National School Resource Officer Appreciation Day. February 15th is also International Childhood Cancer Day, which is a global holiday. February 16th is National Engineers Week, which is February 16th through the 22nd. February 17th is Random Act of Kindness Day. Make kindness the norm. February 17th is President's Day. Also, we want to celebrate our presidents and their accomplishments to help build America and lead America. February 20th is Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day. February 20th is World Day of Social Justice also, which is a United Nations global holiday. February 24th is Public Schools Week, and that is February 24th through the 28th. We're here for the kids. And February 27th is Digital Learning Day. And then February 28th, Ramadan begins from February 28th through March 30th. And that is it for our dates to remember for the month of February. Let's make sure that we celebrate and honor those during this month and recognize all of the accomplishments and all those days that promote inclusion and equity in our wonderful country. Now let's shift to essential news. Story 1 is dated January 13th, 2025. The U.S. Department of Education Secretary Miguel Cardona wrote a letter on January 8th addressing the harmful effects of restraint and seclusion in schools. The letter, sent to governors and education leaders, emphasized the shared responsibility to ensure all children learn in a safe and supportive environment. Cardona expressed concern that children still face restraint and seclusion, even though these practices are harmful and ineffective. He praised states and districts that have banned seclusion and have limited restraint, as well as those using evidence-based approaches to support student behavior. The letter also provided resources for creating inclusive learning environments and helping educators respond to students' behavioral needs. Story 2 is dated January 13, 2024. The Office of Special Education Programs, OSEP, at the U.S. Department of Education has issued a letter stressing the need to retain special education teachers and the important role of principals in this process. OSEP Director Valerie C. Williams provided statistics and resources to help educational agencies support special education staff. A new tool, the Principal Navigator, Special Education Retention, offers practical strategies for school leaders to improve retention. This navigator includes recent guidance supporting a diverse educator workforce to strengthen teaching and learning, and ESEA Title II Strategic Use of Funds. ESEA stands for the Elementary Secondary Education Act. It was developed in response to requests from special education staff and principals for more support in keeping special education personnel in the classroom. Story 3 is dated January 16, 2025, and this is a release from the Office of Special Education Programs, and the release of a report focused on improving outcomes for children and youth with disabilities. This year's states will track 18 indicators for Part B and 12 for Part C, reporting these in their annual state performance plan and the annual performance plan report to evaluate adherence to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The report, titled 2024 IDEA SPP APR Indicator Analysis, Improving Outcomes, Creating Lifelong Opportunities for Children and Youth with Disabilities, include 8 key indicators such as improvements for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers receiving early intervention or special education, family perspectives on early intervention and preschool transitions, high school graduation and dropout rates, compliant individual education programs for secondary transitions, post-secondary outcomes for for youth with disabilities. The analysis also provides data files for each indicator to assess state performance, examples of effective state practices, and additional OSEP resources and technical assistance, a support center to help support districts with this process. Story 4 is coming from the U.S. Department of Education, which has been a busy month for this to be the first of the year. And this story is also dated January 16th, 2025. The U.S. Department of Education issued new guidance today to help students with disabilities prepare for life after high school. This guidance focuses on transition resources under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and the Rehabilitation Act. It builds on a 2020 resource called A Transition Guide to Post-Secondary Education and Employment for Students and Youth with Disabilities. It explains how educational and vocational rehabilitation agencies can work together to support students with disabilities, including those with intellectual disabilities, as they transition to adult services. The guidance covers 5 key points. The first one is IDEA requirements. Transition services help students prepare for education, jobs, and independent living based on their strengths and interests. Number 2, connecting services. Collaborating with agencies like vocational rehab and mental health services is important for planning and resource sharing. Services can include life skills training, job readiness, vocational training, and college enrollment. The third is enrolling in higher education. Students with disabilities can join dual enrollment programs or access transition services at college as part of the education plan. The fourth is pre-employment transition services. Pre-ETS helps students move to post-school life. Services include job exploration, hands-on learning, and teaching self-advocacy skills. And the fifth one is post-secondary education support. Vocational rehab support covers not only associate and bachelor degrees, but also helps support technical schools and comprehensive transition programs. This guidance aims to help states create more opportunities for individuals with disabilities, including students with intellectual disabilities, to participate in post-secondary education and comprehensive transition programs. The next story is dated January 17, 2025. On January 16th, the U.S. Department of Education released guidance to help state and local agencies create inclusive learning environments. Titled Building and Sustaining Inclusive Education Practices, aligned with the ESEA and Part B of IDEA, the guide explains how planned inclusive practices benefit all students. The guidance from the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services and the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education highlights how inclusive practices help children engage in the curriculum and access various supports and activities. The Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services Assistant Secretary Glenna Wright Gallo states that we need states and school districts to design systems that support inclusive practices. There's also a time for intensive education for students with disabilities. We can create welcoming general education environments while providing additional support to those who need it. And that was her quote in supporting this whole initiative as far as inclusive education for those services. The next story from the U.S. Department of Education is coming from the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, and this is an impact story. And this story offers helpful data, guidance, and financial information about the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services. The OSERs aim to improve early childhood education and job opportunities for people with disabilities. The Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services state with this impact story, we want to raise expectations for individuals, their families, communities, and the nation. We do this by advancing policies and providing technical support, distributing grants, and ensuring accountability through the Office of Special Education Programs and the Rehabilitative Services Administration. The final breaking news story that I'm pleased to announce is, drum roll please, EdK&x will be presenting at the 2025 Council for Exceptional Children's Conference in Baltimore, Maryland. Yay! Third year in a row, I will be presenting essential tips for special education leaders and essential tips for Section 504 coordinators in a collaborative session with other researchers and stakeholders. And we will be discussing my book, but we will also be aligning this with the Dyslexia discussion panel. I will be presenting on March 11th from 1 to 2. If you're in Baltimore, Maryland, and you attend the conference, please come by and see me. Let's take a selfie together. And I am truly excited and blessed to have presenting again at this wonderful conference that supports inclusion. All of the news stories and information and the links will be on the EduFaith Essentials YouTube page. Please go there and you can see all of the information from the U.S. Department of Education, all of the related links to the breaking news story, and you'll see the information there for you to access and use. And that is it for our essential news. Today, we're diving into the science of reading, a research-based framework transforming how children learn to read and how schools approach literacy. I decided on this topic because when I present at the CEC conference in March, I will be presenting with a collaborative panel, and in that presentation, we will highlight the science of reading, dyslexia, and how that ties into special education and Section 504 services and leadership. For today's topic, I want to give you an overview of the science of reading and provide some tips and information for parents, leaders, and educators. We'll cover key concepts of reading, highlight laws that promote the science of reading, including the 5 pillars of literacy, discuss how those support students with disabilities and diverse learners, and then I'll provide tips for parents, educators, and leaders. The science of reading is a collection. Science of reading is a collection of cognitive science, linguistics, and education research that helps us understand how children learn to read. A key part of this research is Scarborough's reading rope model, which combines insights from different fields to explain how reading works. This model, created by Dr. Hollis Scarborough, illustrates the 2 key strands of skilled reading: language comprehension and word recognition. The model, if you go online and Google Scarborough's reading rope, you can see the real actual model. For here, I just did a picture graphic because I don't want to infringe on anyone's copyright. But when you think about Scarborough's reading model, Google it, you'll see an example of that Scarborough rope. But the whole premise of the model is language comprehension and word recognition. When you think about language comprehension, this includes background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. These skills enable students to understand and make meaning of what they read. Word recognition over here, this includes phonemic awareness, phonics, and decoding. These skills allow students to identify and read words accurately and automatically. As the 2 strands intertwine over time, they create skilled, fluent readers. Scarborough's reading model reminds us that teaching reading requires explicit instruction in both word recognition and language comprehension. Neglecting one strand can leave students struggling to achieve reading proficiency. When we think about reading and literacy, we want to make sure that we have this model and we use this model because it's particularly impactful for diverse learners, including those students with dyslexia or English language learners, as it provides a clear framework for addressing individual needs. A lot of the information that I'm speaking on today is coming from improvingliteracy.org. Think about the 5 pillars of literacy. The 5 pillars are those that serve as the core of every effective reading instruction program. These pillars describe key concepts that are essential when teaching kids to read. The first is phonics. Phonics is learning how letters and letter groups connect to sounds and how to spell. When you think about phonics, think about the ability to decode words by correlating the sounds with letters or groups. The next one is phonemic awareness, and that's the ability to identify sounds or spoken words. When we think of phonemic awareness, we're recognizing and changing the sounds in spoken words. The third is fluency. Fluency is the ability to read in a way that sounds like spoken language. Reading words and sentences accurately with expression and speed, that's fluency. Vocabulary is knowing what a word means and then knowing how to pronounce it. The ability to understand a word and use a variety of words, that's all encompassed in vocabulary. And then the final one is comprehension, which is the ability to understand text, understanding and making sense of what you read. New research is constantly emerging in regards to the science of reading, so educational practices should adapt as communities and teaching methods evolve. The science of reading isn't a specific program, it's an approach grounded in years of research. While phonics is important, it's only one of those 5 essentials for all children to read effectively. We always are learning more about reading. Science or reading is something that's recently come out. So there's going to be new research and new information, and ongoing research is very crucial to the science of reading. Researchers, teachers, and families need to collaborate to implement the best research practices in classroom using these 5 pillars of literacy. The next thing I want to highlight is the shift. The science of reading has made this big prevalent shift, and it's becoming very impactful within the last 12 months. In Georgia, where I am, there's House Bill 58, which is a structured literacy approach, which is a bill that aligns in pushing out the science of reading to have that structured literacy approach to close the reading gaps. The science of reading has led to significant legislative action across the U.S. to align literacy instruction with evidence-based practices. For example, one is the Right to Read Act, which varies by states. As I mentioned, I'm in Georgia, so we have House Bill 58, which is aligned to that. The law is going to be different, but basically the overview of the law is that teachers receive training in structured literacy and that schools implement interventions based on the science of reading. Another legislative push has been dyslexia screening laws. Many states now require early screening for dyslexia, ensuring students who struggle with word recognition receive the support they need. And the third thing is the third grade reading laws. A lot of third grade literacy and reading laws have been adapted to emphasize the importance of ensuring students are proficient readers by third grade, as those milestones predict future academic success. These laws have been around for a while, but lately, the last 12 months, I would say they've really been refined and fine-tuned in line with the science of reading. Science of reading is really prevalent, and there is a big push for the science of reading across the United States. When we think about how the science of reading impacts our diverse learners, our students with disabilities, let's talk about that. The science of reading is a game changer for diverse learners and students with disabilities. Scarborough's reading rope highlights the importance of addressing both word recognition and language comprehension, which is vital for students who may struggle in one or both areas. Students with dyslexia, the structured literacy approach is grounded in phonics, directly targets decoding challenges, empowering students to become confident readers. When we think of English learners, vocabulary and background knowledge are prioritized to build language comprehension, helping these students succeed academically. And then students with disabilities. The explicit and systematic instruction provided by the science of reading ensures learners receive targeted interventions that address their unique needs. By using data to guide instructions, schools can tailor their approaches, ensuring no child is left behind. Students struggling with reading can benefit from special education services under various categories outlined under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. These services are designed to address challenges related to reading, including difficulties with decoding, comprehension, fluency, and vocabulary. Here are the primary categories and services that may support students under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The first one is specific learning disability, and this is the most common category for students struggling with reading. Some conditions include dyslexia, which specifically affect a student's ability to read. Services might include phonics, decoding, fluency, and comprehension strategies. The next category could be speech language impairment. With speech and language impairment services, those services address challenges in language development that affect reading comprehension and vocabulary. Services often seen include speech language therapy to improve oral reading skills. The third category is intellectual disability. Supports for students with cognitive impairments that affect learning and reading, and those interventions include simplified instruction, repeated practices, and alternative materials. The fourth is other health impairment, and that's for students who have reading struggles that may stem from conditions like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD as we call it. Services may focus on attention and executive functioning strategies that impact reading. The fourth is autism spectrum disorder, or autism. And students with ASD or autism struggle with comprehension and making inferences while reading. Support might include social stories, structured teaching methods, and visual supports. Sixth category is emotional disturbance. Emotional and behavior challenges can interfere with reading performance. Interventions may include counseling, behavioral supports, and individual reading strategies. When we think of special education services, students can receive services under an individual education plan, which provides that personalized goals and accommodations tailored to a student's reading needs. Goals often include phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. The second is specialized reading programs, and this includes evidence-based interventions and programs like Orton-Gillingham, Wilson Reading System, or Lindenwood Bell. These programs use structured, multisensory approaches to address decoding and comprehension. The third is speech-language therapy, and this helps students improve language skills, which directly impact reading comprehension, and that includes vocabulary, building syntax, and verbal reasoning practices. Assistive technology, and these provide tools like text-to-speech software, audiobooks, and reading pens to support literacy. These are supports for students who struggle with fluency and decoding. Behavior supports for students with attention or behavioral challenges affecting reading. And these include positive behavior interventions, focus strategies, and self-regulation techniques. And then the final one is small group or one-on-one instruction, which offers targeted support in a smaller setting. And this allows for explicit, direct teaching tailored to the student's specific reading challenges. And those are some of those special education services that can support students under the Science of Reading and promote literacy. Additional supports for students who may not have an individual education plan or some of these services include the multi-tier system of support. The multi-tier system of support includes Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions for students needing additional help with reading. I did a podcast on the multi-tiered system of support, MTSS, and these ensure early intervention before the referral to special education, where the teacher is implementing strategies and using small group instruction to help support students to see if they require that individualized support. Section 504 plans. And Section 504 plans provide accommodations for students with reading difficulties not eligible for an IEP. The purpose of a 504 plan levels the playing field for a student with a physical or mental impairment. And dyslexia could be a mental impairment that hinders learning. So dyslexia could fall under a category where a student either has an individual education plan or a 504 plan based on the supports needed. Remember, the 504 plan will only have those accommodations, whereas the IEP will have specific goals and objectives that are aligned to the deficits for a student. Under Section 504, some accommodations include extended time, alternative text, and access to audiobooks. With a Section 504 plan for a student, they're going to get those services in the general education plan, whereas a student with the individual education plan, they may be in the general education class, or they may be in a small group, or they may be pulled out in a resource class, or whatever the different models are for instruction under special education. The final support is parent training and collaboration for all students. Whether that student has a Section 504 plan or an IEP, having that parent training and school collaboration equips families with tools to support reading development at home. And some of those strategies include phonics games, shared reading, and progress monitoring. So when parents and educators work together to reinforce the skills, that's always a win-win, whether that student has an intervention plan through MTSS, an individual education plan, or a Section 504 plan. The overall goal is to boost literacy instruction and develop reading at home and at school. So let's recap what I've reviewed so far. Categories under the Individual Disability Education Plan: specific learning disability, speech or language impairment, intellectual disability, other health impairment, autism spectrum disorder or autism, and emotional disturbance. Under special education services, supports include individual education plans, specialized reading programs, speech and language therapy, assistive technology, behavior supports, and small group or one-to-one instruction. And then under the additional supports, we have the multi-tiered system of support, which includes intervention plans, Section 504 plans, and then parent training and collaboration. Now let's shift to some essential tips for parents. The first one is build phonemic awareness. Play rhyming games and focus on sounds when you're working with your child. This is more prevalent for parents of younger children. This may not be something that you do with your older children. Building phonemic awareness is one way that you can hone in on those sounds and ensure that your child understands those sounds. The second one is read to your child. Whether they're young or old, Reading together and reading with your child models literacy, and it really helps students see what structured literacy or see what reading looks like. It helps reinforce the skills and it provides that practice of reading. The next one is ask those teachers about the science of reading and what they're doing in regards to the science of reading to help support your child. You want to ensure your child's school uses structured literacy programs that are aligned with the science of reading. Parents also, you can monitor progress. If your child struggles, ask about assessments or interventions like phonics-based tutoring or dyslexia screenings, and ask what you can reinforce at home to help support your child, and then progress monitor, and then collaborate with that teacher to share that information. As a parent, don't feel like you have to have a complete understanding of each component of pillar. However, develop an awareness of the pillars so you can help your child and include those activities to support your child at each pillar. If you have a younger child, you're going to, of course, push phonics, phonemic awareness. With older kids, you're going to hone in on fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. With the science of reading and the 5 pillars of reading, parents, there's always something that you can hone in on to work with your child at home. So let's recap the tips for parents. Build phonemic awareness, read with your child. Also, I forgot to mention using audiobooks. There are plenty of audiobook platforms out there. Listening to audiobooks helps support reading comprehension, monitor progress, and then understand the pillars that are appropriate for your child, whether it's phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency, vocabulary, or comprehension, and hone in and practice those strategies at home. All right, for my educators. The first thing I want you to do is make sure and ensure that you understand Scarborough's reading rope and how you can use this to guide instruction in your classroom between word recognition and language comprehension. Also, I want educators to practice explicit instruction. Teach decoding and comprehension strategies systematically, whether you're in a classroom with elementary students or you're in a classroom with high school or middle school students. You want to collaborate with and partner with your colleagues, which may include special education teacher, intervention teacher, reading coaches, and families to create cohesive literacy interventions that meets your learner needs. And then you want to make sure that you build language comprehension. Skilled reading depends on not just decoding, but understanding the meaning of text. Under Scarborough's reading rope, we want to emphasize the importance of vocabulary, background knowledge, and language structures. And this could be in any classroom, whether you're a high school teacher or elementary school teacher. Some ways you can do that is teach vocabulary explicitly by introducing new words and context and practicing the use, using read alouds and modeling fluency in classroom discussions, and integrating content-rich text across subject areas like science and history to build that background knowledge. The next thing for teachers is to use data-driven instruction. Using those universal screeners and diagnostic assessments will help you pinpoint what specific areas students struggle and where they need intervention and reteaching. Your district usually has some type of universal screening or some type of assessment, but as an educator, you can use those universal screenings and assessments and then use those assessments to plan instruction that is aligned with your students' needs. You can group your students into small groups and then focus on instruction based on their assessment data, adjust pacing and focus areas based on student progress. The next tip for teacher includes incorporating multisensory instruction. Multisensory strategies engage visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile pathways, making learning more accessible and memorable. Some ways you can do that is use different things that students can use that are tangible, such as finger tracing, sandpaper letter, reinforced letter sound association, bringing in real world examples so they can connect that to the reading text. Pair oral reading with highlighting and underlining, giving key parts of text, allow students opportunities to summarize text, engage students with interactive games and activities that link movement with learning. We want to make sure that you're using those multisensory strategies that tap into your various students' learning styles where that instruction is memorable and it's something that they always can go back to and remember. When I was in Miss Teacher's class, we had the sandpaper and that helped me make the connection to Egypt or whatever your content is. The last tip for teachers include fostering a literacy print environment. The purpose of a literacy rich or literacy print environment is to have a classroom filled with opportunities to read and engage with text, builds motivation and reinforce skills. Having signs on the wall, having anchor charts in your classroom, having those visuals where students can see print language, engage in reading, and absorb all of those different literacy texts that you have throughout your classroom. I was a reading teacher when I taught, and I taught middle school reading, and I've also taught elementary school. During my last couple of years as an educator in the classroom, I was a middle school reading teacher. And one thing I can attest to is that all of these strategies help and support students. And my classroom was a literacy rich learning environment. I had all types of signs on the walls that told them how to start a paragraph, how to engage in reading, how to comprehend text. So I just had all different types of text in my classroom and print rich environments. So when the students came in, they were able to see literacy and concepts to literacy and see it on the wall every day to read that every day. Summarizing my tips for educators: make sure you understand Scarborough's reading rope, practice explicit instruction, collaborate with parents and colleagues, teach phonics and phonemic awareness for my elementary teachers, build language comprehension, use data-driven instruction to monitor progress through formative assessments and universal screeners, incorporate multisensory instruction, and then foster a literacy-rich environment for students. Finally, for my school leaders. Leaders, I want to leave you with a few tips, and that include invest in training. Make sure that your teachers understand the science of reading and that they're allowed time and professional development and professional learning communities to implement, fine-tune, and foster the science of reading in their classroom. The second thing I want to recommend for leaders is to invest in a research-based literacy curriculum. A lot of districts select the curriculum for educators, but maybe you can be a part of that curriculum committee and advocate for instruction, advocate for resources for your teachers to ensure that they're getting those structured literacy, research-based literacy curriculum that's going to actually support your students. The third thing is to allot time for literacy in your school infrastructure. A lot of schools now, when I was teaching, we used to do drop everything and read, which was like 10 minutes every morning where all the students had to read. Make sure that you have time and your teachers have time built in to teach reading, especially in elementary school. Well, make sure that those high school and middle school teachers are teaching those same literacy concepts in their subject areas, because reading is fundamental. In math now, there are a lot of word problems. Social studies is heavy in reading. Science is heavy in reading. So you want to make sure that your teachers are pushing the science of reading and those literacy structures in the middle school and high school area, as well as the elementary area. And they have that time in the school day to teach reading. The next thing for leaders is collaborate with families and promote literacy, not only in the school, but make sure that you're promoting in the home and the community. You might have activities where family reading night in your school, or some type of literacy event in your school that's school-wide that invites families to come in and read with their children, or some type of activity. So make sure that you have those literacy connections that promote home, school, and community in your school and provide those opportunities to foster literacy and the science of reading. The next thing for my leaders is to use data to support instruction. I mentioned this for the teachers, but as a leader, you want to make sure that you have those resources and infrastructures in place for teachers to have those universal screeners so they can use that data to guide instruction. And then you want to champion equity. You want to prioritize resources to support diverse learners, including students with disabilities and English learners. You want to make sure that your special education teachers are part of the conversation. You want to make sure that your general ed teachers understand how to support students who have Section 504 plans and intervention plans appropriately, where they're getting their needs met as far as literacy. Let's recap the tips for leaders. The first is invest in training. The second is invest in a research-based literacy curriculum. The third is allot time for literacy in the school infrastructure. The fourth is collaborate with families to promote literacy in the school through activities and initiatives and build those bridges between school, home, and the community. The fifth is support data use. And the sixth is to champion equity, include all your diverse learners, including your students with disabilities and your English language learners. We want to prioritize those resources to support our diverse learners. Scarborough's reading rope and the science of reading provides a powerful blueprint for literary success. Understanding and implementing these principles empowers every child to become a skilled and confident reader. Our word of wisdom for today is coming from Maya Angelou, and it is all about reading. When I look back, I am so impressed again with the life-giving power of literature. If I were a young person today, trying to gain a sense of myself in the world, I would do that again by reading, just as I did when I was young. That is a quote from author Maya Angelou as she highlights the power of reading and literature. Don't forget to get essential. Remember, I have a number of books to help support leaders, educators, parents, Section 504 coordinators. All of my books are available on Amazon. Make sure that you use these books. They can help support anyone with inclusion and in leadership, parents and educators. The goal is to promote inclusion and make sure that we provide the resources for us to promote an inclusive world and inclusive environment. They're all available on Amazon, so make sure that you purchase a copy, gift a copy, and get essential.
You've got mail.
Now it's time for our essential advice, Ask Dr. Nakia, or share an inspirational story. I want to use this platform to support and spotlight fellow educators, families, and community members. If you have a question, want advice, or to share a wonderful inspirational story on this podcast, feel free to email me at edufaithforall@gmail.com. That is EDUFAITH4ALL@gmail.com. May read your letter, provide advice, or share your story on this podcast. Disclaimer: all listeners should adhere to district policies, follow protocols, remain ethical, and adhere to guidelines in the best interest of children. EduFaith Essentials does not assume responsibility or is legally responsible for anyone's actions based on information provided on this podcast. This podcast is brought to you by EduFaith Educational Services. Some services offered through EduFaith Consulting include consulting and advocacy for parents, consulting for educators, leaders, and school districts, college accommodation advocacy, consulting and training, advocacy in supporting individuals with college accommodations at the post-secondary level, as well as university trainings to support individuals with disabilities and services, parent education trainings, college and career coaching for students who are entering the workforce or the post-secondary college setting, business and district professional development and trainings for churches, nonprofits, businesses, districts, and communities, specializing in services for diverse learners, including students with disabilities, interventions under the multi-tier system of support, English speakers of other languages, education and leadership coaching, program development under services under IDEA, Section 504, trainings, diverse learners, and essential tips books. Feel free to go to www.edufaithconsulting.com to view all the services that EduFaith Educational Services. I want to encourage my believers to be blessed. All others, be kind, be well, and be the change. Follow EduFaith on social media. Twitter, EduFaithS. On Instagram, EduFaith 2021. On LinkedIn, EduFaith Educational Services. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting EduFaith Educational Services and the EduFaith Essentials podcast. Subscribe and follow EduFaith Essentials on the EduFaith Essentials YouTube page and listen to the EduFaith Essentials podcast on all streaming platforms. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. Have a wonderful day and get essential.